Okay, now these questions are from your process costing. We'll start with very simple questions, and then of course process costing has complicated questions as well. But let's start with the simple one. It says that a chemical process has a normal wastage of 10% of input, 10% of normal loss. In a period, 2,500 kilograms of material were input, and there was an abnormal loss of 75 kilograms. What quantity of good production was achieved? So that is very simple. You know that you have input, you have 2,500. Then you have your normal loss. And it says that normal loss is 10%. 10% of your input. So if you consider this as 10%, so it is minus 250. And then you have your abnormal loss. Abnormal loss is, they have also given you this. It's very simple question. I do not even want to do it actually. Minus 75. You just make a total. This is called your good output, 2175 kilograms. So this is called good output. Good output is always like input. Good output is equal to input minus the normal loss minus the abnormal loss. Very simple question. Okay. Quite simple question. Next is 11.2 and 11.3. So let's read the question together. It says that, by the way, it is better that you first read your requirement. It says, what are the equivalent units for closing work in progress at the end of the month? Okay. So, and we know that what is equivalent unit. A company manufactures chemical X in a single process. At the start of the month, there was no work in process. So there is no opening inventory. During the month, 300 liters of raw material were input into the process at a total cost of 6,000. We don't need actually 6,000 because in this question, we only have to talk about the number of units. We are talking about units, so this is not interesting. Conversion cost during the month amounted to 4,500. At the end of the month, 250 liters of chemical X were transferred to finished goods. The remaining work in progress was 100% complete with respect to materials and 50% complete with respect to conversion cost. There were no losses in the process and there is no scrap value. So very simple question. I mean, you know that you have here, and they ask you, please pay attention. They ask you work in progress, the closing work in progress, okay? Equivalent units. They do not ask you equivalent units of total output. They only ask you equivalent unit of the closing work in progress, okay? So your input was 300 liters and your finished goods are, because those which you transferred are finished, they are 250. So it means that you have a closing work in progress of 50 units. So your closing work in progress is 50 units, but these 50 units are not all complete. We call them closing work in progress. It means that they are not all complete. And we need to find out that what is their degree of completion. So when we say that with respect to material, it says that 50% the remaining work in progress was 100% complete with respect to material and 50% complete with respect to conversion cost. So here it is conversion cost. With respect to material, they are 100% finished. With respect to conversion cost, they are only 50% finished. So of course, 50 units multiplied by 100%, you get 50. And here you say, 50 units multiplied by 50%, you get 25. So you have 50 units with respect to material and 25 units with respect to conversion cost. Your answer should be C option, because here we see in C option 50 liters with respect to material and 25 with respect to conversion cost. For this 11.2, answer is C. This was pretty simple. As I said that we'll start with the simple ones. Now let's see what 11.3 they ask. In 11.3 they are asking you that if there had been a normal process loss of 10% of input during the month, that what would the value of this loss have been? So how much would be the value of input loss? So you know that input loss is always measured at the scrap value. Input loss is always measured at the scrap value. In this particular question, they have not given you the scrap value. So if they don't tell you about scrap value, you assume it to be zero. So there are some normal loss and the scrap value is not given. So you assume that it is zero. Answer should be A, nil. You cannot value anything, okay? Because they did not give you the scrap value. Okay, it says that in a particular process, the input for the period was 2000 units. There were no inventories at the beginning or end of the process. Normal loss is 5% of input. In which of the following circumstances is there an abnormal gain? So where abnormal gain? So we know that there is 2000 we are doing input and the normal loss is 5%. And when you multiply 2000 with 5%, you get 100. So it means that your good output should be 1900. So 1900 is good output. So if in case your output is more than 1900, then you will say that you have some abnormal gain. Abnormal gain means when actual output is more than the expected output, okay? Abnormal gain means actual output is more than the expected output. So if I see this actual output is 1800, this actually is giving me an abnormal loss. Here there is an abnormal loss because we say that there should be 1900 units, but you get only 1800. So you are getting less. So this is a case of abnormal loss. So this is not our answer because we are not looking at abnormal loss. They ask us to find out abnormal gain. This is here you've got 50 units of abnormal gain and here you've got 200 units of 100 unit of abnormal gain. Okay, so this is correct. This is abnormal gain. This is abnormal gain. Option 2 and option 3, which means D should be your answer. Pretty simple. 11.6. Okay. How many liters of material were input into the process during the month? Now, this is a very simple question. It is simple mathematics, but many times students, they make mistake. But one time you learn this thing and then the same concept will apply in many situations. It will apply to material. It will also apply to labor. Okay. Let's see. It says that a company needs to produce 340 liters of chemical, needs to produce 340 liters of chemical. There is a normal loss of 10% of the material input into the process. During a given month, the company did produce 340 liters of good production, although there was an abnormal loss of 5%. There was an abnormal loss of 5% of the material input into the process. So material input, whatever you did, so you got your output 340. You know that there is a 10% of normal loss and there was also a 5% of abnormal loss. And the question is that how much was the material input? How much material did you start with? Okay, so sometimes what students, they make mistake, they try to multiply 340 with 10%. Okay, you cannot multiply 340 with 10% because 340 is output and losses are always calculated on input. Okay, always remember, I will write down here that losses are calculated on input quantity and not on output. So never make this mistake. Never multiply loss with the final output. Loss is always based on the input. So we have here our good output. We can say that our good output is equal to input minus normal loss minus abnormal loss. Your good output is 340. Input is how much? You do not know. Let's suppose it is X. And then normal loss will be 0.10 of X because they told us that normal loss is 10% of the input value. And then you also have an abnormal loss of 5%. Abnormal loss 5% will also be calculated as 5% of X. So you can say that you have 340. 340 is equal to 0.85 of x. And then I can say that, x is equal to 340 divided by 0.85. And then you multiply it, 340 divided by 0.85. So 400 liters actually you have, uh, input, your input material is 400 liters. This is, your answer should be option D. So this is very simple. Just whenever you get such type of question, just consider this type of equation in your mind. Okay. So 400 liter was the input, 10%, which means 40. It went into your normal loss, and then the remaining went into abnormal loss. You can say that 400 into 0.15 is your total loss. So what is 400 into 0.5? 0.15, it is 60 liters. When I say 0.15, it means that 10% normal loss, 5% abnormal loss. Achha, ye 11.7 and this is 11.8. Now, a very typical process costing question, and you should expect such question in exam as well. It is simple because you don't have opening inventory. So your life is little bit simple because there is no opening inventory. If there is opening inventory, then there could have been a little bit different situation. It will take a little bit more time, but you will understand the full process. So what happens that it says that a company produces a certain food item in a manufacturing process on 1st November. There was no opening inventory of work in process. During November, 500 units of material were input to the process with a cost of $9,000. Direct labor cost in November were 3840. So this is 500 units you started, and your labor was your cost of material was 9,000 and cost of labor was 3840. Production overhead is absorbed at the rate of 200% of the direct labor cost. So if 3840 is labor cost, then overhead will be double of this. Overhead will be 7,680, 2 times of this. Closing inventory on 30th November consisted of 100 units. So you have got closing inventory of 100 units, which were 100% complete as to material and 80% complete as to labor and overhead. So 80% to labor and overhead, there was no loss in process. Okay. Now, what is the full production cost of completed units? Okay. They ask you full production cost of the completed units. Now, this question you have to do in 3 steps. Step number 1 is where you prepare your statement of equivalent units. Okay. That how many equivalent units you produced. So statement of equivalent units is your step number 1. So you say that you don't have opening inventory. Let me put it as 0. And I would say that added during the process, it is 500. And I've got my closing inventory. Closing inventory is minus 100. And when you make a total of this, it gives you that your closing inventory, your completed units are actually 400. So this is what you say completed. Completed is 400 units. No, sorry, work in process, because this is actually closing inventory, 100 units. Closing inventory on 30th November consisted of 100 units. So this is actually completed. I'm sorry, I wrote it correct. So your completed units are 400. Okay, now what do they ask you? They ask you that, how much, what is the number of total, you have to find out your total, how to say, statement of equivalent units, because you've got 400 units which are 100% complete, but you also have some work in process of 100 units, and these 100 units, they have some degree of completion. Some work has been done on them. So you have to calculate what is the equivalent unit within this 100. This 400 is straight. It has got no problem, okay? The problem is with this 100, because within this 100, they are not fully finished. They are 100% finished with respect to material and 80% finished with respect to labor and overhead. So now we need to make our statement of equivalent units. We can just think of any format. Format is actually important in your, how to say this calculation. You should say that completed units and you have work in process. Okay. So you've got completed units, you've got work in process. And let's suppose we write down here with respect to material and with respect to conversion cost. You call it conversion cost because the degree of completion of labor and work in process is same. I mean, labor and overhead. Labor is also 80% and overhead is also 80%. So it means I can add it. I can call it my conversion cost. So for the, with respect to conversion cost, because you know that labor plus overhead is called conversion cost. They are they are 80% finished. So we can say that we have completed units 400 and work in process is 100. Those which are completed with respect to material, they are completed here. And they are also completed with respect to conversion cost. I mean, these 400 units are fully finished. Material is done, conversion cost, labor overhead is done. You can call it this much. But when it comes to work in process, it says that 100% complete as with respect to material. So this is with respect to material, they are fully finished. So this multiplied by 100%, okay? So 100 I put here. But with respect to conversion cost, they are just 80% finished. So I can say that these 100 units, they are actually only 80% finished with respect to the conversion cost. So equivalent units which are coming in, they are 500 units of 500 equivalent units with respect to material and 480 equivalent units with respect to conversion cost. So this is your now statement of equivalent units. How many equivalent units do you have? So you say with respect to material, I have got 500 equivalent units. With respect to, you know, conversion cost, I've got 480 uh, units, 480 equivalent units. Then the second step is we need to find out cost per equivalent unit. This is your step number 2. In step number 2, you have to find out cost. So what was the material cost which you put in and what is your conversion cost? You can call it your conversion cost. So they gave us in question that material was 9,000 and conversion cost was how much? Conversion cost was actually, okay, let me write down here 9,000 so that things will become clear. With respect to conversion cost, my conversion cost will be 3840 plus 3840 into 2. This 3840 is labor and another 3840 into 2 means that it is because they told that overhead is 200% of labor cost. So I'm taking overhead as 2 times of my labor cost. 2 times means 200%. So this is your material cost. This is your conversion cost. For material, you have 500 units. For conversion, you have 480 units. So it means that after spending $9,000 of material, we got 500 equivalent units. And after spending 11,250 on labor and overheads, we got 480 units. And now you start just divide it with this and you get here. Sorry, it is this one divided by this one. So per unit material is $18 and conversion cost is 24. So you know that one equivalent unit has $18 of material and one equivalent unit has $24 of conversion cost. So this is your step number 1 was step 1. This is your step number 2. And then will come step number 3, because this is what they ask you. So question says, what is the full production cost of completed units? So I would say that full production cost of completed units. And you know that how many units you have completed. You have completed 400 units. So 400 units multiplied by the material, which is 18, plus 400 units multiplied by the conversion cost, which is 24. So you can just put it here and put equals to sign. So it is 16,800. You can also do it like this, that you can make a total of this number and it will give you 42. And you can just say that, okay, I completed 400 units multiplied by 42. It will also give you the same number. It will not be any difference. So 16,800, this is your answer, which is here option number C. I know that this question looks too difficult for 2 marks, but the thing is that once you do this 2-mark question, the next one, this 11.8 will look easy because most of the work you have done in 11.7. Then 11.8 will become easy. Okay, next is 11.8. It says, what is the value of closing work in progress? Now this will become easy for you, okay? Because you already have done your most of your calculations. So we have to calculate now the value of closing work in process. Now we know that closing work in process. So 11.8, it says that value of closing work in process. So what is closing work in process? You know that your closing work in process was 100 units, but they were not complete. Remember, they have some degree of completion. So you say that with respect to material and with respect to conversion cost. If I go up, if you see here, with respect to material, they were only, how to say, 100 units were complete. With respect to conversion cost, they were 80 completed. So I would say that with respect to material, I've got 100 equivalent units. With respect to conversion cost, I've got 80 units. Listen, you don't have 180 units. Never make mistake of adding them up. It's not that they are adding. You don't have 180. You have only 100. But you say that with respect to material, all 100 are finished. But with respect to conversion, only 80 units are finished. So it's like the amount of work done, the quantity of work done on these 100 units. If you count, they are 100, but I'm just saying that within this 100, how many units are finished with respect to labor, and within this 100, how many units are finished with respect to material. So this is 180. And now we know that cost per equivalent unit, cost per equivalent unit of material was 18, and cost per equivalent unit of conversion cost was 24. And then you just simply multiply them. You say 18 multiplied by 100. So within this 100 units, the work which is equivalent to material is 1,800, and the work with respect to conversion cost is 1980. And now you make a total. When you make a total, it will give you 3720. This should be your answer. Okay. Now, listen, what we learned from here. Let me conclude this question. We started 500 units. And out of 500, 400 we finished, plus 100 were still there. We know that we had a total cost. You know how much was your total cost? This was your total cost. Okay. You spent this money, 9,000. Your total cost was 9,000 plus 11,520. And you spent this money, total amount is 20,520. Now we want to see that this 2520, how much of this is within the closing inventory and how much of this has gone to the completed units. So if you say that your finished goods, your completed units, and your work in process, okay, how much was your completed units? Completed we calculate 16,800, and this one we calculated 3720. You make a total and you get the same number, 2520. So we actually split this number 2520, this total cost, between the what to say, completed output and between the work in process.